Local government has also often found itself the victim of factional battles within political parties. The ANC in the Northwest and the Eastern Cape both implemented changes to provincial leadership following the ANC elective conference. Now, this is also there's also a rumoured reshuffle on the cards for Gauteng. The question is, how do these changes impact local service delivery? For more on this, I'm joined by Good Governance Africa's Executive Director, Chris Maroleng. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. I suppose there's a lot to consider before a cabinet reshuffle. What are the big factors that factor in as this decision is made?
Well, Mpho, I think this is the essence of governing and indeed governance. And I think what should be at the forefront of any decision really is the interest of the people, that is at local level, delivering services, ensuring that the governance processes run in a correct and effective manner. Unfortunately, as you're aware, in many instances, we have not seen this occurring. And as you indicate today, that changes in positions, in leadership, often results in a lack of continuity and certainly a lack of clear and defined and transparent methods of governing.
What about the other dynamics to consider when it comes to the actual individual, the perceived performance of the minister or the official under the spotlight? How does that now form part of the bigger picture?
So, Mpho, here at Good Governance Africa, we define governance as that process that determines who gets what, when, and how. The effectiveness of the authority or the person who is bestowed such authority is determined on their ability to govern effectively and govern within the limits of various legislative instruments, various doctrines and practices that define the environment in which such a leader operates. And therefore, the way in which we judge them and determine their effectiveness is how they execute on the mandate that they've been handed down, which is ultimately the litmus test on whether they have been a sound and effective governor.
For instance, we saw President Cyril Ramaphosa during the July unrest unleash the whip for the security cluster's failed response to that unrest. We saw the likes of Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula being fired from cabinet. But what we see more and more is perhaps the shuffling of the same pack of cards, so to speak, moving ministers and deputy ministers around. How effective is that when it comes to trying to implement some bold changes?
It is not effective at all, in the sense that what seems to happen is that, and I think this raises the frustration of many people, is that we see the recycling of what are viewed as somewhat incompetent and ineffective leaders at the highest level of governance in our country. This raises the immediate question on whether there is a need, in actual fact, to renew the leadership. Most recently, we've heard from the president indicating that it is the intention, at least of his party, the ANC, to ensure that younger or more youthful generations are added into this leadership mix. But more importantly, I think people don't really care about the person's age, but really competence. What people of South Africa want is effective and competent leaders who have the interest of the people at heart, who have the propensity to rule in ways that demonstrate accountability and transparency, and ultimately what we describe as servant leadership. I think it's very important to understand that the attitude of those who would lead is very important, in the sense that if they have an attitude that is really towards delivering services, serving in the public interest, those are the kind of leaders that we need in South Africa.
We saw the changes when it comes to the ANC in the Northwest and the Eastern Cape, a reshuffle happening. There's also now rumours of the same process being instilled in Gauteng. I mean, you speak about the calibre of leadership. How do these changes impact local service delivery? I mean, what sort of messages does it filter down to the people on the ground, the community members who just want effective service delivery?
These situations can present an opportunity for political parties, whichever they may be, to ultimately put into positions of authority people who have the propensity and the will to serve the people. I think the frustration of many in South Africa is that what many political parties that find themselves with the opportunity to appoint people to such places of authority do not seem to have the interest of the communities that they represent at heart. Very often we see leaders who seem to be more focused on serving their own personal interest. And I think this is the challenge. There is an opportunity if we can see these political parties understanding that what the people need is good and effective administrators and leaders who have the interest of the people at heart.
How can this transition become a lot smoother? Because what it ends up doing is opening up, factional battles on the ground. And then that in all essence becomes the focus as opposed to actual service delivery.
I think this is the frustration about the political process, in that what happens is that politics becomes the name of the game, and very often that politics occurs within the various political formations in South Africa, because there's an understanding that those who ultimately find themselves at the top of this leadership process in positions of authority also have access to resources. And these resources are often, as we've spoken about earlier, are not directed at the people. They're often, usurped and used for the narrow interest of these individuals and their close associates, very much resembling the politics of patronage. This patronage politics, unfortunately, results in politicians not focusing on delivering services, but fighting themselves to assume these positions where they can have access to resources. They call it the politics of the belly, where ultimately issues around access to resources are the predominant things or issues at the top of mind for such leaders, unfortunately.
What makes a good leader? Because, I mean, we got a hint of the sort of qualities that are required when we listened to ANC stalwart, former President Kgalema Motlanthe, speaking and announcing the standards that are required for the National Executive Committee. He spoke about morals, and he spoke about good ethics that round up the individuals that will be essential in steering the party forward.
Indeed, I think leaders who assume office in the public space ultimately need to understand fundamentally that they do so in the interest of the citizens, the people of this country. Leaders who do not understand and introduce or portray what we've described earlier on in our conversation as servant leadership. That is leadership that is ultimately inclined and has the propensity towards demonstrating leadership attributes that want to serve those in the communities, in the offices, the high offices that they occupy, are the kind of leaders that we need. And that leadership should be underpinned by sound moral and ethical values that really must be focused on ensuring that their style, their administration is accountable, it is transparent, and ultimately in the interest of serving the citizens of this country. That's what public leadership must be ultimately about serving the people who have put you into such high office.
Yeah, especially as we heard throughout the ANC conferences, the party's Paul Mashatile speaking about the questions that are asked as they conduct door-to-door campaigns, saying that corruption factors in, but the overall messaging when you go and see residents and communities on the ground, questions are asked about employment and what will you do to make my life better? How can I access services? Really speaking to the heart of the problem that communities just want service and efficient service delivery.
You see, Mpho, communities don't want slogans. They don't want empty promises. They don't want people to provide them with messages that ring hollow. They want concrete, very clear plans. They want very clear strategies that will help resolve the pressing issues around security in our country, around issues relating to the delivery of services like water, electricity. They want leaders who can ultimately come with solutions to the pressing economic challenges that we face, where there's rampant unemployment in South Africa and in many societies. These are the kind of solutions that the people of South Africa are calling for. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in situations where we have leaders who seemingly are unable to come up with innovative strategies that can solve the very pressing issues that really face our country today. And we call upon those who are ultimately in high office, in public office at this stage, to really consider the fact that what the people of South Africa want is accountable leadership that delivers on the promises that are made, and that these promises should not be hollow and empty and self-serving in order to gain votes.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. Good Governance's Africa's Executive Director, Chris Maroleng, speaking there to the dynamics at play when it comes to local government, where it finds itself with the factional battles within political parties and the impacts of reshuffles.